And the sermon is entitled The Promise of a Friend. When you are about to leave your friends whom you have loved and taught and nurtured, how would you feel and what would you say? This reminds me of a time when the students were graduating from the Japanese high school we taught many years ago. For the graduation ceremony, some of the teachers wear beautiful kimonos. The graduation ceremony in Japan, I realize, involves more bowing than the Chinese imperial court and more crying than soapy Korean dramas. Anyways, one year there was a male gym teacher who was a master in kendo, the art of sword fighting, and who experienced his first graduation ceremony ever as a homeroom teacher. And as he was giving out the high school diploma to his students on the stage, he broke down in tears, and the tears did not stop until he finally got off the stage. It was actually quite beautiful to see the tenderness of a tough guy who had grown to love his students as he was shedding tears of sadness and tears of joy. Unlike a Japanese high school graduation, the teacher, Jesus, was leaving rather than his beloved students. He knew that his disciples were living in a world that was not that kind, especially to the peasants living in Galilee under the Roman occupation. He was also leaving them with a new teaching which may not go over well with the established religions and philosophies of his day. So he gave a lengthy sermon to prepare them, encourage them, and empower them. During this time of pandemic, just like the disciples, we also need the same kind of reassurances. So much hardship has visited our world. Many small business owners are struggling, and some may even face bankruptcies. The workers who are laid off are living with stress and anxiety. Many people have lost their loved ones due to the virus. Individual Chinese people living in Canada and the United States are experiencing verbal and physical attacks. Children around the world are not getting the medical treatments or other medicines they would normally be getting, and many are dying as a result. People cooped up in their homes are suffering from quarantine fatigue, and some are dealing with domestic abuse. To the worried and anxious disciples and to us who are undergoing this pandemic, Jesus promised an advocate, someone like a friend who will have our back, who will give us strength when we are weak, who will give us hope when we are discouraged, who will give us assurances when we are anxious. Jesus said, I will not leave you orphaned. I am coming to you. In a little while, the world will no longer see me, but you will see me. Because I live, you also will live. Furthermore, Jesus says, on that day you will know that I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you. It is a startling promise and revelation that we are in Christ, and Christ is in us. The time that I felt this most noticeably happening to me occurred during the time when I was in Cold Lake, Alberta, where I started my first ministry. And there were three people in the church who really got on my nerves. One person was really petty, another never kept his promise, and the third was a racist towards the First Nations people. I dealt with my anger and frustration by going for walks in the Cold Lake Provincial Park at least once a week. I'm not sure how long I had walked, but it must have been at least 2 months. After all the time alone, walking the trails, breathing in fresh air, something began to shift inside of me. Instead of being angry, I began to pray for them, for their well being, for the work they do for the church despite their flaws. I even prayed like Jesus on the cross, forgive them, God, for they do not know what they do. In that moment, I also realized that no matter how they might treat me or what they may say, what is the most important is how I chose to respond, which I decided it will always be with compassion, wisdom, and gentleness. When I came home from that walk, Angie asked me, "What happened to you out there?" I said, "Why do you ask?" She said, "Because your face is glowing." The Spirit of Christ finally penetrated my soul to transform how I saw the people and the situation. Yes, the Spirit of Christ is in us, whether we realize it or not. The key is to acknowledge that Christ is indeed in us as our advocate, as our friend and helper. The Spirit of Christ will help us to get through this pandemic while helping us to see that face-to-face gatherings of our friends and families do really make a huge difference in the quality of our lives. Christ is also helping us to see that small blessings do come each day that can fill us with gratitude if we were to take time to notice. We also realize that doctors, nurses, and long-term caregivers are the true heroes of our society, as are the teachers, the lowly migrant farm workers, the grocery store workers, the truck drivers, meat packing plant workers, and inspectors. Christ is teaching us to learn new things and to appreciate the people who do not get enough due recognition. In this time of pandemic, Christ has not left us orphans. Rather, Christ, the teacher, is teaching us new things and is helping us to dream of a better world. So we bow our heads in gratitude, and like the tough Japanese gym teacher, we too can shed a tear of joy as we realize that Christ is in us and around us. Thanks be to God.